Imagine you're driving on a lonely country road. You look at the song title on the display reflected in the glossy glass in your car, and suddenly you see reflected in it streaks of light. Turning your head, you look out the side window to see what it is, and you see a fiery ball streaking across the sky. It disappears into the horizon, but it captivates your mind as you drive. Could it be a ship of some kind from another world? When you get to your destination, you are fixed on what it was you saw. Firing up your laptop, you Google alien fireball in Wyoming. And just as you suspected, there are reports of a mysterious sighting many people believe could be of extraterrestrial origin. You knew it. It was an alien ship. Wow. If you'd only stopped to take out your phone, you might have had some true life viral video on TikTok. You decide that next time you see something like that, you won't let the opportunity slip away. So what's wrong with this scenario? Well, let me help you out. You assumed it could be a ship from another world. Your Google search included the word alien, skewing your research results to others whose first inclination of a sighting would have been something alien. Knowing that a video of such a thing on TikTok would blow up your views, maybe lead to fame and money, you've devised a plan to look for something like that in the future and share it online before someone else can beat you to it. Meanwhile, an observatory 50 miles away writes on their blog about S-27 fragment burning up in the atmosphere, an object they've been watching and blogging about for 2 months. It was not a ship, it was not an alien intelligence, and it was not a surprise event, but you believe in what you think you witnessed. And that is going to dictate your future actions and convert others to your cause. You have just fallen into the trap of confirmation bias. According to The Economist, confirmation bias is a tendency to favor information that confirms your already held beliefs. This propensity is of very human nature and occurs irrespective of which side of the argument a person is on. People tend to look for information that supports their viewpoint. It influences every way in which we assimilate and interact with information. If you go and look for confirmation bias online, you will often see two circles, and they'll be intersecting in the center. I've created a little bit different view of that, but the takeaway here is that we represent facts and evidence on the left side, and we have our beliefs on the right side. What comes together in the middle is the evidence and facts that we will actually believe and acknowledge. Our beliefs are gating which knowledge and which facts we believe are true. And that is kind of a good snapshot of how confirmation bias can work. In 431 BC, the Athenian historian Thucydides wrote his account of the 5th century BC war between Sparta and Athens, entitled The History of the Peloponnesian War. Quoting, he says, "Their judgment was based more upon blind wishing than upon any sound prevision. For it is a habit of mankind to entrust to careless hope what they long for, and to use sovereign reason to thrust aside what they do not fancy." With the advent of the psychology of reasoning in the 20th century, Peter Wason coined the phrase confirmation bias. Wason was a cognitive psychologist at University College London. His early studies were focused on language and psycholinguistics. In 1960, Wason began devising tests to reveal failures in human logic. Some of his famous tests were things like the 2-4-6 task, which demonstrated illogical and irrational human reasoning; the 4-card task, which revealed people are predisposed to results that confirm their hypothesis; and the Thog test, that's THOG, showed weaknesses in human ability to access multiple pieces of information while reasoning. This is known as combinational analysis. Peter Wason wrote the books Thinking and Reasoning in 1968, Psychology of Reasoning with P.N. Johnson Laird in 1972, Thinking, Readings in Cognitive Science in 1977, and The Psychology of Chess, co-written with William Hartson in 1983. There's an excellent book by Ken Mangtolo called Beyond Reasoning on the lifetimes and work of Peter Wason, pioneering psychologist, if you're interested in learning more about that. So Neil deGrasse Tyson is known by many people, but if you don't know him, he's an astrophysicist, author, and science communicator. He's head of the Hayden Planetarium in New York City and a research associate at the Department of Astrophysics, the American Museum of Natural History. Tyson wrote, "One of the biggest problems with the world today is that we have large groups of people who will accept whatever they hear on the grapevine just because it suits their worldview, not because it is actually true or because they have evidence to support it. The striking thing is that it would not take much effort to establish validity in most of these cases, but people prefer reassurance to research." So if I say, "I hate Atlanta traffic," well, that would be an opinion. What if I say, "With fewer cars on the road, carbon emissions would go down"? That is a fact. Now, if I say, "More people should care about our planet," well, that sounds like a fact, but objectively, it's actually an opinion, even though it's framed as a solution. But if I say, "If more people cared about our planet, carbon emissions would go down," now this is developed into a theory, a belief that pursues truth. However, truth is a moving target. So why does confirmation bias occur? Some of the key reasons would be worldview. People understand the world based on factors they may not be aware of. Or efficiency. People process information quickly to protect themselves from harm. This is something that we've evolved to do over time. Prejudgment. People make quick decisions where they seem to already have an opinion. And self-esteem. People feel good when they're correct, and they may discard contrary information because of that. Now, if we link these thoughts to what are called project phases, this is defined by the Project Management Institute's PMBOK, or Project Management Body of Knowledge. And this can kind of tell us how we can apply the idea of confirmation bias, what could happen because of it. We'll talk about some takeaways about how you can actually ward off some of these things. The first phase in the project lifecycle is initiation. So, unrealistic expectations. What outcome beliefs are held by stakeholders? That's something you might want to know. Lack of resources. What do stakeholders believe about labor, material constraints, and budget limitations? Risks. Are stakeholders predisposed to accept certain risks or to discount a project that contains certain risks? Moving into the second phase, which is planning. Inaccurate time allocation and poor time management. Does the organization hold to inaccurate labor time estimates to complete project work items? Is there a culture of schedule accountability? Are time management tools available to the project? Do stakeholders value project planning? Will leadership support the project plan? Does hardline, and by that I mean direct report leadership, discount honest project requirements in favor of misplaced optimism? As we're talking about planning, it's probably a good idea that we look at the principle of EGAP. Everything goes according to plan. So you know if you've planned anything, what are the odds that everything is going to go according to plan? They could be underestimated costs. There could be overestimated benefits. And the iron law of project management says over budget, over time, under benefits, over and over again. And that is an example of what we call a convex or accelerated risk model. The third phase is project execution. And are matrixed teams accountable to the project leaders? So if you're not familiar with project management terminology, matrixed basically means that you're in an environment with mixed accountability. So the project manager may not have folks reporting directly to them. They may report to other managers as their actual managers. And then they may just get sourced to the project to do the work. That's sort of a simplified take on what a matrixed environment could result in. But hardlines, do hardline or direct report managers deprioritize project work from dotted line leaders? So a project manager or a manager in another department might be a dotted line person to this person who's doing work. And if the person that they report directly to that actually does their reviews and is their direct report manager or hardline manager is going to deprioritize work from the dotted lines, that's something that you definitely want to know about. And that happens a lot. Does the culture substitute historical norms for identified project-specific needs? Will stakeholders accept new information, or will they ignore unscripted attempts to communicate with them? In the fourth phase, which is monitoring and controlling, does the organization promote monitoring certain aspects over others due to historical norms? Do monitoring blind spots exist, adding risk to the projects? Are hardline managers committed to backstop the concerns of dotted line project leaders? What prior experience will project leaders leverage? Have project leaders discussed how intuition will be vetted? That's a big one. And when we get into the fifth phase, that's called closure. Is there a culture that minimizes the importance of actually having closure or doing a closure activity? Will the organization tolerate additional project work if data indicates the project is not ready for closure? Have matrixed resources been removed from previous projects prior to verified completion and the formal closure of the project? Will hardline managers backstop dotted line project leaders to conduct a methodical lessons learned deep dive? So if we don't know what we've done before, then we are likely to repeat it again, okay? That axiom, if you don't know history, you're likely to repeat it again. Lessons learned is something that is often not carried through in project work and is extremely important to organizations to be able to continuously improve. When we look at a communications plan in a project, what could happen as a result of confirmation bias? Okay, so what do we mean by that? What unspoken assumptions exist with leadership or the team? Is the customer or project sponsor unclear about the purpose and or the needs of the project? Are team members lacking the big picture and not listening for complete instructions? Is remote work or differing work schedule causing team members to miss key handoffs or build work on an incomplete dependency? Are team members missing important nuances resulting in a lack of understanding? That can happen from cultural differences. Moving into the risk management element of project work, an organization might have a culture that is overly permissive of certain project risks and it has an exaggerated intolerance of other kinds of risks, and this can vastly affect the project. When we talk about risk management, we're often talking about a risk register, risk breakdown structure, and a risk response plan. One or more of those elements may be at play in any given formal project. In risk management, what risks are believed to be inherent in the project by the sponsor, the client, and team members? What risks are believed to be a given by management, such that they may not be open to using resources to mitigate them? What risks are believed to be avoidable and not a serious possibility by the sponsor, client, and team members? What risks are believed to be a possibility, but there is low tolerance for them occurring with the sponsor, client, or team members? An aspect of confirmation bias is illustrated by the Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning-Kruger could be summed up with the proverb, "A little knowledge is a dangerous thing." That is actually a misquotation of a 1709 essay by Alexander Pope entitled "An Essay on Criticism," where Pope wrote, "A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Perean spring. Their shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking largely sobers us again. And that is from the Phrase Finder. Gary Martin does a wonderful job at that. If you haven't checked that out, you can find his work at phrases.org.uk. Common understanding of a little knowledge is a dangerous thing would be a small amount of information can lead a person to think they have more knowledge than they actually possess. A person with an incomplete picture may overestimate their abilities. A small degree of ability could become more dangerous than none at all. A partial knowledge has a higher probability of being biased. Specifically talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. Written from Psychology Today, quote, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people wrongly overestimate their knowledge or ability in a specific area. This tends to occur because of a lack of self-awareness, prevents them from accurately assessing their own skills. There is dissenting viewpoints about Dunning-Kruger, however. Eric C. Gaze is a senior lecturer of mathematics and director of quantitative reasoning at the Baldwin College. Writing for Conversation, Gaze said, to establish the Dunning-Kruger effect is an artifact of research design, not human thinking. My colleagues and I showed it can be produced using randomly generated data. The analysis performed by Gaze and his colleagues means that the pervasiveness or extent to which people present this cognitive fallacy was exaggerated in the 4 studies which underpin the 1999 research paper authored by Cornell University psychologists Justin Kruger and David Dunning. However, this cognitive fallacy does exist, and the focus placed on it by the study illuminates a real facet of confirmation bias in human reasoning. Quoting from Decision Lab, the Dunning-Kruger effect is important because it makes us aware of our own blind spots and lends us the opportunity to adjust our self-perceptions. Because it is most invisible to those experiencing it, it requires taking a step back to realize that your own self-assessments are largely biased and likely incorrect. Continuing from Decision Lab, quote, at its core, the Dunning-Kruger effect preys on not a lack of information, but rather an abundance of misinformation. We know when we know nothing, but it is information that is wrong that causes us to think we know everything and absent-mindedly press share. You may not know what you're good at because you assume that what comes easily to you also comes easily to everybody else. You are therefore robbed of the ability to spot your own specialties and talents. So that's an insidious kind of thing that this effect can have on teams and how people interact, and whether you can leverage, fully the talents that your team members can offer. You may have team members that don't fully participate, or that you don't fully take advantage of what they have to offer, because there are others who believe they know more than they know, and their voice is the loudest. Specifically talking about misinformation and disinformation, the American Psychological Association says this: misinformation is false or inaccurate information, getting the facts wrong. Disinformation is false information which is deliberately intended to mislead, intentionally misstating the facts. The Dunning-Kruger effect is often illustrated with charts that are similar to this one. I created this as a hybrid of a few different representations. So what you're seeing is, if you look on the left side, you'll see the confidence level goes from low to high. And you'll notice that enthusiasm is a trait that confidence will bring about in many people. On the lower line, you'll see the level of knowledge. Notice that the enthusiasm on the left side peaks when there's still a very small amount of knowledge that the person has on the low side. So a person in this part of the Dunning-Kruger effect is enthusiastic and confident, but they are in possession of a very small amount of information. So the likelihood that they're going to spread misinformation is high. As they become aware that they don't know everything they think they know, then their enthusiasm or confidence craters. And this can lead to, for lack of a better word, despair. If they continue to work at learning more about whatever it is that they're following this model in, they become slowly more enlightened. And at this point, self-awareness and enlightenment, or additional knowledge and ability, start to come together. And we can see the illustration on the right side. This is where both high knowledge and high confidence are exhibited at the same time. And that's sustainable because the knowledge and confidence is underpinned by the enthusiasm, and confidence is underpinned by knowledge or ability. A consequence of this effect is discussed by the Decision Lab. Quote, the Dunning-Kruger effect can cause us to listen to confident people before reputable people. This has immeasurable effects on our society, as we accept information and advice from those who will speak first and loudest, before those whose words will hold the most merit. This is key to having a successful project, to make sure that those who have merit, those who have knowledge, are those who are participating well in the project. So we've talked about some things that are at play with confirmation bias, the Dunning-Kruger effect. What about personal choice? Can we choose to not do these things? Well, there are certain behaviors and certain ways of operating that we can embrace in order to ward this off. So let's look at some of the takeaways of things we can do. When we find evidence that confirms what we already believe to be true, it satisfies our desire to feel good about ourselves. When we find evidence that conflicts with our notion of truth, we may feel bad about ourselves, but we can flip the script. Remember, feelings are not facts. An ability to accept new information and change your position is a mark of good character. Reducing confirmation bias would involve things like not avoiding information that may contradict your position. Admit to others when you find you are incorrect. It is almost always the case that your influence will be reduced if you don't own your own mistakes. Challenge your hypothesis. Seek evidence that could invalidate your theories. Arguments based on new data can actually bolster your position. Look to identify repetition. This is something that should put a little red flag up in the back of your mind. Repeated information begins to sound true. Be skeptical of leaders or of information sources that tell you something over and over and over. Specifically with challenging confirmation bias during the project life cycle, challenge assumed goals. Vet that perceived stakeholders are actually stakeholders and not just activists. Gate organizationally accepted scope creep. So if your organization has a habit of, well, we always let the schedule run long in this phase, that's something definitely you want to take a look at. Communicate the definition of an issue fix. So what is fixed and what is done? Document a disruption mitigation plan. And this isn't something we hear about a lot, but if you have a plan about how you're going to mitigate a disruption, what you're going to do, who you're going to leverage, that can be useful. Define and hold to an understanding of completion. Again, like I said a minute ago, what is done? And everybody may not agree on what the definition of done is. So in a project, we document it, put it in the plan, make sure the team understands. When we say this is done, it means this and this. If you're leading a team, how do we ward off confirmation bias? Well, identify existing group and organizational beliefs. Expose yourself and your team to contrary viewpoints. Watch for feedback loops, which confirm expected results. Set the expectation that the team seeks new information and can reevaluate best practices. Poll your team members individually to avoid groupthink, and then share results with the team. Listen to all sides and carefully consider them before coming to a conclusion. And do not permit individuals to hijack team community to repeat their viewpoint in an effort to convince others of its truth. Ways in which we can work to avoid the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this comes from Decision Lab. Assuming that you are an expert probably means you're just beginning. Don't gloat in ignorance. Seek feedback from others who can help you improve. Gain insights into others' abilities to get more realistic data about where you stand. If other people are telling you you're an expert, practice active listening more than speaking. And that's it. If you would like to get a copy of the slide deck that goes along with this video, you can find it linked in the description. Thank you for your time and attention. Until next time, remember, the future depends on continuous improvement today.